Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. We are from Group 1 and we will present about the audit of payroll cycle. So I'm Nur Atira binti Azmi, metric number 273746. So let's proceed with the introduction of this part. So for the payroll, the general meaning of payroll is that is the wages, salaries and additional compensation that were paid to the employees sporadically. Payroll also can be interpreted as the paychecks distribution process and procedure. Payroll also known as the acquisition employee and their payments. Meanwhile, for the audit of payroll, it is done to ensure the accuracy of a payroll process in a company. Audit of payroll also involves things such as assessing the wages and salaries rate, the relevant employees and the payroll tax. In addition, audit of payroll is a procedure to determine whether the employer is accordance with the collective bargaining agreement terms that related to the benefit funds that need to be contributed by the employer. So in layman's term, the audit of payroll is to determine the right employee reported at the right time and the right pay rates for the correct units of payments. So we move to the objective of payroll cycle audits. So this objective is divided into three parts, which is transaction, balance, presentation and disclosure. So for the transaction, we have occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cut-off and classification. So for the occurrence, it means that the sales and wages are paid to the active employee and based on their works performed. For the completeness, is about the all transaction need to be recorded. Accuracy is the calculation of salary and wages need to based on the employment terms and works performed. So for the cut-off is that about record all the payroll transaction in a correct period. And lastly is the classification. For the classification is about all transaction need to be appropriately classified. So we move to the balance. In balance, we have existence, right and obligation, completeness, valuation and allocation. So existence is payroll expense are valid to the company, and right and obligation is about payroll expense are the obligation of the company. So completeness is the same with the transaction, which is all transaction need to be recorded. Valuation and allocation is that the payroll transaction need to be properly valued and allocate according to the accounting standard. Lastly is the presentation and disclosure. So here we have occurrence, right and obligation, completeness, classification and understandability, accuracy, and lastly is valuation. So for the occurrence, it means that need to present and disclose all relevant transaction. Need to disclose all the relevant transaction only. And for the right and obligation, it's just that needs to disclose payroll transaction that have occurred and related to the company. And the completeness is like usual, where the all transaction need to be recorded. Classification and understandability is that financial information related to the payroll is appropriately present and disclosed. Accuracy is the transaction need to be disclosed with with the correct facts and without any exaggerate information. Lastly is valuation. The payroll transaction need to be fairly disclosed and with appropriate value. So that's all from this part. We will move to the second part.
Good morning, doctor. My name is Nguyen Xiang. My normal matrix is 280703. Today, I would like to present about the developing of an audit plan. Developing the audit plan. Why we need a plan before we proceed something? Because it can make sure us carry out the event step by step. so that the task can be complete on time. What is the audit plan? An audit plan is a list of audit procedures that auditors need to perform to gather sufficient appropriate evidence on which to base their opinion on the financial statement. The procedure in an audit plan should be stated in enough detail to instruct the assistant about the work to be done. Developing an audit plan for payroll transaction entails performing risk assessment procedure by obtaining an understanding of the entity and its internal control over payroll transaction. Understanding the entity to identify inherent risks. What is inherent risk? Inherent risk means that the risk posed by an error or omission in a financial statement due to a factor other than a failure of control. As auditor, we must be aware of any event or activity carried out by the entity that could reasonably be expected to have a significant impact on the risk of material misstatement. The inherent risk of an entity can be affected by both external and internal influence. Examples of external influence are economic and competitive conditions, changes in technology, and changes in accounting practice common to the industry. Internal influence include the susceptibility of assets to loss or misappropriations and the volume and complexity of the economic transaction. Obtaining an understanding of the company includes understanding of relevant industry, regulatory, and other external factors. The nature of the company. The nature of the company with its include the company organizational structure and management personnel. The source of funding of the company operations and investment activity, with its including the company capital structure, non-capital funding, and other debt instruments. The company's significant investment, the company operating characteristic, with its including its size and complexity. We must be aware that the size and complexity of a company may affect the risk of misstatement and how the company addresses those risks. The source of the company earning and also the key supplier and the customer relationship. The company's declarations and applications of accounting principles, including related disclosures. The company objectivity and strategy and those related business risks that might reasonably be expected to result in risks of material misstatement, and the company measurement and analysis of its financial performance. How the auditor gain this understanding of a business? The auditor gain this understanding of business through discussion with management and other client personnel, through experience with other entities in the same industry, by reviewing AICPA accounting and audit guides, industry publications, other entity financial statements, business periodical, and also textbooks. What is AICPA? AICPA is American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. It is related to professional auditing standard. The body tasked with establishing auditing standard for the audit of non-profit entities through statement on auditing standard issued by the Auditing Standard Bureau. This knowledge can help auditors identify areas of special attention, such as the account and classes of transactions where fraud or error might exist, evaluate the reasonableness of accounting estimates made by management, evaluate management response to inquiries, and make judgments about the appropriateness of management choice among accounting principles.
Assalamualaikum and hi, I am Anis Aisha Ismail. My matric number is 281881. I will present about the understanding of internal control over payroll transaction. The auditor can better understand the internal control over payroll by preparing a written description or flowchart or completing an internal control questionnaire on payroll transaction. This can help auditors gain a better understanding of internal control over payroll transaction. The auditor then may determine if the internal payroll control are appropriately and effectively implemented. For example, auditors can observe the segregation of function between HR and payroll disbursement in order to decide if payroll and authorized deduction are appropriately recorded. Auditors can observe, incur, and inspect documents such as the payroll register. Now, let us see some examples of internal control procedures for transaction objective. Okay, the first audit objective is occurrence. The example of internal control procedure is separation of duties between processing and personnel activity is maintained, such as the check signer should be responsible for the custody and mailing of checks to prevent any alterations made. The test of control the auditor can do is check the necessary authorization for all check payment record additions, updates, and deletion, as well as the authorization for payment of employee benefit expenditure. Next, completeness. Examples of internal control procedure is updated record payroll data should be maintained by payroll department with recent update information. The test of control that auditor can do is the check signer or the payer should double check that the payroll amount is right and that the employee's details such as name and address match the payroll record. Okay, next we will look on the accuracy. The situation or procedure that we can relate to this is internal verification to ensure that the amount of payroll need to be recorded accurately in compliance with work records and employment conditions. So, the test of control that can be done is examine the employee's file to determine whether they have double-checked the accuracy of employee benefit charts to confirm they are in line with their employment contracts. So the next audit objective that we are going to look is cut off. The internal control procedure that can be related to cut off is termination, pay rate adjustment, and deduction should all be reported to the payroll processing function as soon as possible. The test of control that can be done is examine the indication of internal verification and test method for the preparation of time, work records, and the recording of liabilities. And the last audit objective that we are going to take a look is classification. The internal control procedure that can be related to classification is for account charged to payroll, proper internal verification and permission are required. The test of control that can be done is examine the employee's record to ensure that employee benefit costs have been properly classified. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assessing risk of material misstatement. The auditor must identify and assess the risk of material misstatement due to fraud and respond appropriately in order to obtain sufficient evidence regarding these risks, even though it is not the responsibility of the auditor to prevent or detect fraud. The auditor can evaluate whether the payroll is susceptible to misstatement due to the complexity of payroll computations. The primary payroll risks include payroll is intentionally understated, inappropriate party receive the payment, or employee receive duplicate payment. When the payroll file occurs, understatement or overstatement of payroll expense may exist. On the other hand, overstatement of payroll can occur when theft is present. For example, if a payroll accountant pays himself twice, so the payroll expense will higher than the actual one. Payroll mistake also lead to payroll misstatement. payroll error can occur when payroll personnel lack sufficient knowledge to carry out their duty. Additionally, misstatements occur when employees fail to perform internal control procedures such as reconciling bank statements. The last one is designing further audit procedure. Following the assessment of material misstatement list, the auditor must proceed to the next audit procedure, which include control tests and substantive procedure. Auditor is responsible for designing further tests that should be performed. The amount of procedure to be performed are determined by the assessor's risk level. Auditors should evaluate the design of control and determine whether they are implemented effectively to address major risks of misstatement. In order to address the risk of material misstatement in payroll records, auditors need not rely on the evidence or them from previous period or analytical processes. That's all from me. Thank you. I would like to pass to next person who is present the test on control.
Hello and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Ashikimiti Sabir. My metric number is 273358 and today I'm going to present the topic of test of control. Okay, so what is actually test of control? Okay, test of control is actually one of the audit procedure to understand and to assess if the client's internal control regarding the payroll cycle is working effectively or not. Okay, so this test can be used to avoid, to detect, and also to correct any risk for material misstatements that might arise. Either the risk is low, medium, or high to each level of accession. Not only that, by doing this test, auditor also can use it to find more audit evidence that can be useful to support the outcomes of auditor's statements. Okay, so first we are going to look into the two types of control. Okay, when auditor wants to conduct test of control, the auditor will have to assess two types of tests, which involve test of design effectiveness and also test of operating effectiveness to acquire some additional sufficient evidence. Okay, so first of all, we are going to look into the test of design effectiveness. Okay. In testing of design effectiveness in payroll controls, auditor may use it to determine whether the company's control is actually operating effectively or not, okay, by seeing how the persons with the given authority perform the control and see if they are actually able or not to achieve the objective of company's control. Okay, this is very needed actually, okay, in order to prevent any and to detect any possible misstatements and see if the payroll controls are operate or not for the company. Okay, so for example, okay, a good design is when a company assign only one senior member from payroll department to be in charge for any changes related to the payroll system, standing data, and then it will be reviewed by another responsible employees to check for any errors. So that is the example for test of design effectiveness. Okay, then we are going to look for the test of operating effectiveness. Okay, even if the company has the design in payroll controls, it will be a waste and not operating effectively if the employees who assigned to perform the control doesn't actually have the necessary authority and competency. Okay, that is why auditor must do testing of operating effectiveness, okay, to evaluate if the control is operating as designed by the authorized employees or not. Okay, so we take one example. Okay, if the company has assigned 2 employees with 1 person in charge to see any changes in the payroll system standing data, and the other person is responsible to review the changes to detect if there is any misstatements done by the other person, then the one who review the work of the other person must deeply understand first how they should do the review of changes in payroll system standing data and to ensure that they are given the necessary authorities. Okay, this is actually very important. Okay, to ensure that two people who have two people have deeply understood of their task assigned to them and given necessary authority while performing their task. Okay, to avoid any issue. Okay, for example, if the person who is reviewing the work of the senior members is actually from lower level, this can without having necessary authority, it will make them feel uncomfortable to have fully access to the information needed to evaluate the payroll system. So that is that is why the test of operating effectiveness is very important. Okay, next we are going to look for test of control based on this 5 level of accession. Okay, first of all, we are going to look into the occurrence. Then we are going to go for the completeness, authorization, accuracy, and the last one is cut off. Okay, first is about occurrence. Okay, if there is any misstatements regarding the payment made to the fictitious employee, such as the payment to employer, an employee who have not work or already terminated, then the auditor must do occurrence test by selecting the sample of terminated employees and properly see if their name in the payroll register to avoid them being paid twice. Okay. Auditor can also review the personnel files by taking sample of the list name for employees hired for that current year in the company, okay, to ensure any changes in the employment status reported immediately to the human resource department. Okay, next we are going to look into completeness test. Okay, auditor can also do completeness test on client's payroll control. Okay, by checking the numerical sequence of time cards to ensure all services done by employees are actually recorded, okay, properly in the payroll register. To avoid any understating payroll expense for the employees. Next, we are going to look for the authorization test. Okay, auditor might as well perform our authorization test. Okay, to see if the management properly followed the internal control when paying the employees or not. Okay, the auditor can select a sample from employees hired in the company and review if the authorization procedures is properly followed by inspecting the time work, okay, the rate of commission, wages and salaries, and also check for approval done by a responsible official in payroll transaction. Okay, so by doing this, the auditor will be able to ensure the payroll register of each employee is the same as stated in their personnel folder, in order to see if the deductions made for the payroll is appropriate or not. So that is the authorization test. Okay, so the next test that auditor can also test is the accuracy of the payroll control in the client's company. Okay, this is to see whether all the payroll transactions are free from misstatements or not. Okay, so auditor can do the test by checking the total amount of payment paid to the employees and classification of recorded account in order to ensure that everything is actually correctly done. Okay, so that is for the accuracy test. Okay, and then we are going to look for the cut-off text. Okay, what is cut-off text? Okay, this is the test that auditor conduct. Okay, to ensure all the payroll transaction are recorded in the correct accounting period by reviewing the procedures for any payroll liabilities being recorded soon after it has incurred or not. So that is the meaning of the cut-off text. And that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Hi and good day everyone. My name is Dazzling, number metric 280-847. Now I will continue with my substantive procedure. Substantive procedures are the method or audit tests designed by an auditor to evaluate the financial statement of the company which required an auditor to create conclusive evidence for verifying the completeness, accuracy, consistent, occurrent measurement and valuation of the financial record of the business. Substantive procedures have been designed to guarantee that the procedures element is successful in collecting adequate audit proof that the payroll is not exaggerated, and it is performed to ensure there is no any material misstatement in accounting transaction and all relevant information is reported. If payroll transaction control are not properly enforced or are insufficient, the substantive procedures should be carried out until the auditor has obtained a better understanding of internal controls. Even payroll has a high level of inherent risk due to completeness and accuracy assertion. Most organizations have a proper payroll control system in place. The control is generally effective and the control risk is low. As a result, auditors concentrate on the application of analytical process to payroll expense account and test of control for substantive procedures. Auditors should compute the assessment to be undertaken based on the risk thresholds that have been determined. If they conclude that the control risks are significant, they should perform a higher standard of substantive procedures to acquire the requisite audit evidence. There's three types of substantive procedures, which is analytical procedures, test of details of transaction, and test of details of balance. For test of details of transaction, it is used to corroborate test of details of balance. The tests of transaction are normally performed during an interim audit and in the form of dual-purpose tests. Substantive measurement of transaction are checks performed on individual transactions executed throughout the payroll period. The objective of this test is to identify monetary mistakes. It is a type of test that collects documentation of a company's operation so that it can validate the occurrence, completeness, authorization, and accuracy of the transaction. Furthermore, auditors mainly focus on test of balance rather than test of transaction for payroll cycle. The second test is test of details of balance. It is intended to show that the control and substantive tests of transaction are appropriate. The monitoring test is an audit test that is used to determine the effectiveness of the controls. If the tests are found to be destructive, this will have an impact on the study of balance data. Test of details balance of payroll cycle is focused with obtaining verification of accrued payroll amounts. It consists of two tests, which is recalculating payroll liabilities and verifying directors and executive officer remunerations. Auditors must recalculate the accrued payroll and check all authorized deduction. They are required to check on the consistency of payroll calculation and payroll accruals. The audit concerns overstatement of payroll amount, but for accrued payroll balance, the audit concerns understatement of the accruals. Auditors should check on subsequent payroll payments to ensure that the payroll accrual stated at the end of the current period is appropriate. Auditors should also look at documents such as meeting minutes to approve director and executive officer remunerations. This is to ensure that there is no overpayment of bonus. Example of accrued expense for payrolls included pension, insurance, income tax, and EPF. The verification of data deals with authenticity, valuation, completeness, and disclosure. That's all from me. Thank you. Now, I would like to pass to next presenter to present analytical procedures.
Now, we proceed to the analytical procedure. Analytical procedure is done to evaluate possible relationship between financial and non-financial data. There are three stages in analytical procedure. The first stage is to assess an entity understanding and the possibility of changes to payroll amount. The second stage is to ascertain any changes in payroll amounts between current and previous year. The last stage is to measure the average wage per employee ratio, which changes could be caused by an increase in wage rate for the current year. There are several examples of analytical procedure in the audit of payroll, such as comparing the current year balance with the prior year balance of payroll after adjustment of the number of employees. Next, the auditor can do a comparison between budgeted payroll with the actual payroll. Lastly, compare payroll costs as a percentage of sales with the prior year's cost and industry data. Finally, we have come to the final part, the conclusion. Overall, we can understand that payroll is an important component in every company, and payroll can be understood by the acquisition of employees and their payments. For audit of payroll, it is to determine the right employee with the right payments. And next, for the auditor, needs to perform test of control in order to achieve the audit's objective, which is consists of occurrence, completeness, accuracy, right and obligation, and lastly cut off. For the substantive procedure, the auditor needs to perform it in order to guarantee the audit proof are adequate and the payroll is accurate. Substantive procedure consists of test of detail of transaction, test of detail of balance, and lastly the analytical procedure. And that's all from our group. Thank you.